My son's killer never held a gun. He used words instead. Words that cut deeper than any blade, that followed my boy into the dark until he couldn't escape them anymore. 30 years ago, my son took his own life after being humiliated, mocked, and broken by someone who thought cruelty was just a joke. I buried him with my own hands, and every day since, I've lived inside that silence, the kind that never really ends. I thought the world had forgotten his name, that time had swallowed the truth. But I was wrong, because 3 decades later, on a quiet night, I turned on the television, and there he was, the boy who destroyed my son's life, all grown up, wearing a perfect smile, shaking hands, surrounded by flags and applause. Congressman Jason Cole, America's symbol of hope. My hands went cold. My pulse slowed. 30 years of grief turned into something else, something sharp. I swore then that he would remember. I swore that the world would too. And what I discovered 3 decades later will leave you speechless. His name was Michael, 15 years old, smart, quiet, the kind of kid who'd rather draw heroes than try to be one. His world was made of pencils, notebooks, and imagination. Every night after dinner, he'd sit at the kitchen table sketching scenes from his comic series. The Silent Night. A boy who couldn't speak but always did the right thing. He'd show me the drawings, his eyes lighting up when I nodded and said, "Looks like he's saving the world again." He'd grin, that crooked little grin that still visits me in dreams. On weekends, we'd toss a baseball in the yard. He threw softly, always afraid to hurt someone. I used to tease him, "You gotta put more strength in it." Now I wish he'd kept all his strength for himself. High school changed him. Not at first, just small things. He stopped talking about friends. He'd come home tired, shoulders slumped, drawings untouched. I assumed it was teenage mood swings. I was wrong. One evening I found a crumpled piece of paper in his backpack. Loser. Nerd. 4 eyes. Scribbled in marker. The next day he brushed it off. "It's fine, Dad. Just jokes." But jokes can rot the heart when they never stop. Jason Cole was the name I didn't know then, but would never forget. Son of the mayor. Star athlete. Golden boy. The kind of kid teachers adored and parents bragged about. He had charm like armor, and cruelty hidden behind it. He made Michael his favorite target. Because Michael was quiet. Because Michael didn't fight back. It started small, a push in the hallway, a nickname shouted across the cafeteria. But cruelty grows like a seed, watered by laughter. By spring, everyone was in on it. Jason filmed Michael tripping over his backpack, then slowed the footage, added music, posted it online. The clip spread through school like wildfire. Even some teachers saw it. No one said a word. That night, Michael came home later than usual. His face was blank, but his hands trembled when he reached for his sketchbook. He didn't draw that night. He just stared at the page until it stayed empty. A week later, I got a call from the school. They said Michael had been involved in an incident. That word, incident, is a coward's word. It hides the truth. I arrived to find my son in the nurse's office, shirt torn, dirt on his knees, cheeks red from humiliation, not pain. He refused to tell me what happened. A teacher, trying to sound neutral, said, "It was just a misunderstanding among students." I wanted to believe her. But when I looked into Michael's eyes, I saw something closing, a door I couldn't open anymore. That evening, during dinner, he barely touched his food. I asked again, "Son, do you want to talk about it?" He forced a smile. "It's fine, Dad." 3 words that would haunt me forever. Days passed. He grew quieter, sleep-deprived. I heard muffled sounds at night. Crying he tried to hide. Once, I stood outside his room, hand hovering over the doorknob. But I didn't go in. I told myself he needed space. What he needed was someone to break through that silence. Then came Friday. The day everything ended. He didn't go to school that morning, said he wasn't feeling well. I left for work after making him breakfast. He smiled at me from the porch. "See you later, Dad." That was the last time I heard his voice. When I returned, the house was too quiet. His shoes by the door, his bag on the floor, a single sheet of paper on his desk, written in blue ink. The handwriting was neat, painfully neat. "I just want the noise to stop." I read it once, twice, 10 times. The words wouldn't move, but the world did. Spinning, collapsing, breaking. I shouted his name until the walls shook, until my throat tore. But the only answer was silence. People talk about grief like it's a storm that passes. It's not. It's a tide that drags you under, again and again. At the funeral, his classmates came, the same faces that laughed at him, now pretending to mourn. Jason stood there, expressionless, dressed in black. He even spoke to me. "I'm sorry, sir." His voice steady, rehearsed. I remember staring at him, trying to see remorse. All I saw was confidence, the kind that comes from never being held accountable. The school called it a tragedy. The town called it unfortunate. They moved on. I didn't. I cleaned Michael's room and found his last sketch, unfinished. A hero standing on a cliff, facing a monster twice his size. The hero had no mouth, no words, just eyes filled with light. I realized then that's how he saw himself. Small, silent, still trying to be brave. I promised him right there that his story wouldn't end that way. But promises mean nothing against time. Years passed, decades. The town forgot. The school built a new wing, renamed the gym after Jason's father. The video disappeared. The laughter didn't. It echoed in my mind every night. 30 years later, I was still haunted by that note. "I just want the noise to stop." I'd kept it folded in my wallet, worn thin like scripture. Sometimes I'd read it just to remind myself that pain this deep should never be forgotten. Then one night, I turned on the TV, and the noise started again, louder than ever. There he was, the same smirk, the same eyes. Jason Cole. Older now, smoother, polished, announcing his campaign for Congress. Applause filled the room as he spoke about protecting our children, giving them a voice. My hand tightened around Michael's note. That day, my heart stopped with his. But now, 30 years later, it began beating again. Not with love, not with hope, with purpose. 30 years is a long time to live with ghosts. My house had become a museum of silence. Same wallpaper, same ticking clocks, same air that never moved. After my wife passed, it was just me and the quiet hum of timepieces that refused to stop. I fixed watches for a living. Ironic, maybe, for a man who would give anything to turn time back. Every day was predictable. Open the shop, greet no one, close at 6, eat alone. The world had gone on. I had not. One night, the television was just background noise. Political ads, empty promises, the usual static of modern life. Then, a familiar name sliced through the noise. Congressman Jason Cole announces his campaign for Senate. I looked up, and the screen froze me where I sat. There he was. Older, sharper suit, perfectly rehearsed smile. But the eyes, those cold, gleaming eyes, hadn't changed. I'd seen them before, looking down at my son on a high school gym floor surrounded by laughter. The same grin that once meant humiliation now sold integrity. The room started spinning. My chest tightened, a dull ache spreading through my ribs. The past didn't flash before my eyes. It lunged. I saw Michael again, small and shaking, that cruel video replaying in my mind, Jason's voice echoing, "Smile for the camera, loser." He'd moved on. He'd built a career, a family, a reputation. My son stayed in the ground. The television cut to Jason shaking hands with voters, kissing babies, saying all the right things. Then came the line that made me stop breathing. As someone who believes every child deserves to be heard, I've spent my life defending our youth. Defending our youth. My hand curled into a fist before I realized it. I turned the TV off, but his voice kept playing in my head. That same confident tone, only now dressed in patriotism instead of arrogance. For the first time in years, I felt something more than grief. It was focus. It was purpose. I walked into Michael's room. Everything was still in place. The comic sketches, the old trophies, the faded curtains. I looked at his last drawing on the wall, the silent knight, standing tall against a shadowed monster. I whispered, "You wanted to stop the noise, son? Maybe now it's my turn." That night, I opened my laptop for the first time in months. I typed Jason Cole biography. The screen filled with curated perfection. Ivy League graduate, philanthropist, veteran, family man. I scrolled further. Articles about his charity for underprivileged teens, photos with smiling kids, quotes about empathy. The hypocrisy burned through me like acid. Then I found it. A tiny, buried link. An old newspaper clipping from a local archive. Headline: Private school athlete cleared after investigation into harassment allegations. The article was vague, written decades ago. No names, no victims. But the year matched. The school matched. I didn't need names. I already knew. The words "cleared of wrongdoing" meant one thing: protected. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. The Cole family had always owned this town. Money, politics, connections. They'd cleaned up the mess, erased the evidence, and built a golden path for their son. And while Jason climbed toward power, Michael's name had been reduced to a forgotten headline: Local Teens Death Shocks Community. The irony twisted inside me. The bully had become the voice of morality. The liar had become the lawmaker. For years I told myself revenge was pointless, that it wouldn't bring Michael back. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about memory, about truth, about balance. I wrote Jason's name on a piece of paper, next to my son's. 2 words, 2 lives, 2 ends of the same rope. The next morning, I started collecting everything. Michael's letters, the school records, the old police report that went nowhere. Most of it was dust and denial. But I needed to see it again, needed to remember every detail, every failure. I found the yearbook. Jason's picture was there, right above Michael's. Jason's caption read, "Future leader." Michael's read, "Dreamer." I traced my fingers over both names and whispered, "Let's see which one history remembers." I began keeping notes, dates, names, archived files. I contacted the school district. They claimed records had been lost in a system upgrade. Convenient. Then I called the local newspaper. Their archives were restricted. Everywhere I turned, doors shut. But I wasn't the same man I was 30 years ago. Time had made me patient. I knew how to wait, how to listen, how to find cracks in silence. One afternoon, I drove to the town's public library. The librarian was new, young, curious. When I mentioned Michael's case, her face softened. "I think I've seen something," she said, leading me to a microfilm archive. And there it was, an article that never made the digital transfer. A small paragraph at the bottom. An unnamed student alleged ongoing bullying by a local official's son. The claim was dismissed due to lack of evidence. I snapped a photo of the screen. My hands trembled, not from age, but from clarity. This was it, proof that it wasn't just teenage cruelty. It was cover-up. That night, I poured myself a drink for the first time in years. I stared at the glass and said out loud, "You want to defend youth, Jason? Let's start with the one you destroyed." The decision settled in me like a quiet storm. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I would make the world see what he'd done. And if he thought 30 years had buried the past, he was wrong. Because I'd spent 30 years digging, the search began quietly. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not the few friends I had left, not the neighbors who pitied me. After 30 years, grief had taught me how to move unseen. My first stop was the high school. The building had changed, new paint, new name, but the halls were the same length, the same smell of wax and adolescence. I stood outside the main office, listening to the echo of lockers slamming, kids laughing, the rhythm of life that had gone on without him. The secretary was polite but cautious when I asked about old records. "Most of those files were digitized years ago," she said. "Some might have been lost." Her smile was professional. Her eyes weren't. She knew something. As I turned to leave, I heard someone call my name. "Mr. Hayes?" The voice belonged to a man in his 40s, sharp suit, kind eyes. "You might not remember me," he said. "I'm Daniel Parker. I went to school with Michael." I did remember him. Quiet boy, always sketching with Michael in the art room. Now he was a teacher here. "I heard about what happened," he said, voice lowering. "I'm so sorry. I still think about him." I studied him for a moment, then asked, "Do you remember Jason Cole?" Daniel's expression darkened. "Everyone remembers Jason." He hesitated. "You know, after Michael died, there was talk. Some kids tried to tell the principal what Jason had done. But his father was the mayor back then. It disappeared overnight. Jason was suspended for 2 days. For language. That's all it said on record. The confirmation hit like cold wind. "So there were reports?" He nodded. "There were. But trust me, you won't find them now." Before I left, Daniel slipped a piece of paper into my hand. "Call me if you need help," he said. "Some of us still remember what really happened." That night I sat at my kitchen table with Michael's note beside me, the paper Daniel had given me folded neatly next to it. On it was a name, Ellen Ward, the retired school secretary. "If anyone kept copies," he'd written, "it's her." Ellen lived 2 towns over, in a small white house at the edge of a wooded lot. She opened the door slowly, suspicious until I told her my name. Her face softened. "Michael Hayes," she said quietly. "I remember that boy. He was gentle." I told her why I'd come. She hesitated, then led me to a small room stacked with boxes. I kept some old things. They said to shred the student files after the digital transfer, but I never trusted computers. She smiled faintly. Sometimes paper remembers what people want to forget. We spent hours digging through folders until she froze, pulling out a thin yellow envelope. Inside were photocopies, disciplinary records, handwritten notes from teachers. One document was labeled Incident Report, March 12, 1990. The victim's name was redacted. The offender's was not. Jason Cole. Under Buster Zuwar-Broder. Description, it read. Harassment of another student in locker area, verbal and physical intimidation, recorded by classmates. The resolution line had one word: dismissed. Beside the file was an old clipping from a local paper. Teen humiliated in locker prank, school investigates. The article mentioned no names, but the quote from an unnamed close friend sealed it. He just wanted them to stop. Michael's words. I thanked Ellen and took the copies. She put a hand on my arm before I left. Be careful, Mr. Hayes, she said. That family still owns half the county. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't in years, a pulse of direction. This was more than grief now, it was evidence. Still, I knew I couldn't do it alone. That's when I found Ana Perez. She was a young investigative journalist, small town paper, but a reputation for chasing stories that made powerful people nervous. I emailed her the files. She called the next day. If this is real, she said, it's dynamite. It's real, I told her. We met in a cafe on Main Street. She was direct, confident. Jason Cole's running on a platform about youth empowerment. You expose this and it's political suicide. But we need corroboration. I told her about Daniel, about Ellen, about the old article. She leaned forward. If he did this once, he did it more than once. These people don't change. They just get better at hiding it. Over the next few weeks, Anna and I worked quietly. She tracked down former classmates. Some hung up on her. Some refused to talk. But a few told their stories, off the record. A girl named Sarah admitted she'd been harassed too. He made fun of me for my weight, she said. I transferred schools. My parents didn't want trouble. Another boy confessed he'd once filmed one of Jason's pranks, but deleted it after the mayor called his family. They said it was a misunderstanding. My dad believed them. Patterns, names, timelines. The puzzle was forming. Anna drafted an outline for an expose. The hidden past of Senator Jason Cole. We decided to wait for his public appearance at the town hall next month. That would be the moment. Cameras, witnesses. No way to spin it quietly. While Anna prepared her article, I returned to the school one last time. I walked down the same hallway where my son had once been humiliated. I stood at the locker where it happened, untouched for years. Someone had painted over the graffiti long ago. The paint was new. The memory wasn't. That night, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, no handwriting I recognized. Inside, one sentence typed in bold: let the past die. For a long time, I just stared at it. The paper smelled faintly of smoke, like it had been near fire. I called Anna. They know, I said. She didn't sound surprised. That means we're close. I read the letter again, then whispered to myself. It already did. Now it's time for truth to live. The threats didn't stop me. They focused me. The week before the town hall, Anna received confirmation from a national network. They'd run the story if we could get a direct confrontation. You ready for that? She asked. I've been ready for 30 years. The night before the event, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Michael's room again, the air heavy with memory. His drawings had yellowed with time, but one caught my eye. The silent knight standing before a dragon, shield raised. I ran my fingers over the paper. You always believed the truth would win, didn't you? I unfolded his last letter again. The ink had faded, but the words still burned. I just want the noise to stop. I looked at the small stack of files on my desk. Proof of what had been buried, what had been protected. Tomorrow, the noise would end on my terms. This is not revenge, I said softly. This is remembrance. The next morning, I dressed in my best suit. one I hadn't worn since my wife's funeral. In the mirror, the man staring back looked older, harder, but alive. For the first time in decades, I wasn't the father of a victim. I was the father of a story that deserved to be told. Anna texted me one line. "Tonight, he faces the truth." I replied, "So do I." As the sun rose, I placed Michael's note in my breast pocket, right above my heart. I wasn't going to that town hall to shout or to fight. I was going to witness something. Justice breathing again after 30 years underground. And in that quiet morning light, I swore that when I spoke, it would be the first time the truth had ever been heard out loud. The town hall was packed. Cameras, reporters, flashes of light bouncing off polished marble. The air hummed with the kind of excitement that always comes before a lie dressed as inspiration. At the front, on the stage beneath the great American flag, stood Senator Jason Cole. Perfect suit, perfect smile, perfect story. I sat in the fourth row, hands gripping the edges of my chair. My heart wasn't beating. It was pounding like a fist against time. Beside me, Anna was setting up a small recorder. Her press badge caught the light. "Remember," she whispered, "say his name when the time feels right." Jason's voice filled the hall, smooth, rehearsed. "We must protect our children," he said, pausing for applause. "We must give them safety, support, and the courage to speak when others won't." I almost laughed. The sound got stuck somewhere between grief and rage. He continued, "When I was young, I learned how cruel the world can be. But I also learned that with strength and compassion, we can overcome anything." The hypocrisy was too much. I stood up. My voice came out rough, almost breaking, but it carried. "Do you remember Michael Hayes?" The room froze. Jason blinked, mid-sentence, his smile faltering. "I'm sorry?" "You should be," I said. "He was 15, quiet, kind. You made his life hell." Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras swung toward me. Security moved, but Anna held up her badge. "He's a grieving father," she said. "Let him speak." Jason tried to regain control, gripping the podium. "Sir, I understand your pain, but you're mistaken. Am I?" I said, pulling a small folder from my coat. "Because I have everything you buried 30 years ago." Anna stepped forward. The big screen behind Jason flickered to life. Her voice echoed through the hall. "These are testimonies from former classmates of Michael Hayes and other victims of bullying at Brookfield High. Each account names one person as the aggressor, Jason Cole." The screen filled with faces. Older now, but their voices were clear. "He mocked me until I transferred schools. He humiliated people for fun. He said no one would ever believe us." The crowd began to murmur. Jason raised his hands, trying to contain it. "This is political sabotage, lies from a desperate man." Anna's next clip silenced him. It was an old yearbook photo. Jason Cole, captain of the football team, arms slung around another student, smirking. The caption beneath it read, "The prank master himself." The screen zoomed in, revealing a faint mark on the edge. Michael's name, half scribbled out. Jason's jaw tightened. "That's nothing, just childish jokes." Then another voice came from the back of the hall. No, it wasn't. Everyone turned. Daniel Parker, the art teacher, Michael's old friend, stepped forward, shaking but resolute. "I saw what you did," he said. "I saw you shove him, record him, make him beg you to stop. And when he died, you smiled at the funeral." The silence that followed was a roar of judgment. Jason's composure cracked. "This is insane," he snapped. "You can't prove anything." But proof was already in motion. Anna projected the scanned report, the disciplinary form with Jason's name and the word dismissed. Gasps erupted again. Reporters scribbled furiously. Dismissed, I repeated softly, stepping closer to the stage. That word bought your future. My son paid for it with his life. Jason looked smaller now. His face had lost its color. This isn't about politics, I said. It's about truth, about a boy who just wanted the noise to stop. Security didn't move. No one did. Even the cameras stayed still, drinking in every second. When it was over, Jason walked off stage, surrounded by aides shouting into phones. The press swarmed. Headlines would be written before dawn. Senator accused in decades-old bullying case. Hidden past threatens rising star. By morning, it was everywhere. Jason Cole suspended his campaign to focus on family matters. The Senate Ethics Committee opened an inquiry. Sponsors dropped him. His perfect smile vanished from television. But victory tasted strange, like rain on stone. A few days later, a letter arrived at my door. Handwritten. Shaky. I don't expect forgiveness, it began. But I want you to know I remember him. I always did. And I'm sorry. It was signed, Margaret Cole. Jason's mother. She'd enclosed a photograph. Jason, about 12, standing beside a tall man in a mayor's sash. His father's hand gripped his shoulder hard enough to wrinkle the boy's shirt. The caption on the back read, "Smile or else." That night, Anna called. "We've uncovered more," she said softly. Jason's father was investigated once, for abuse, never charged. The reports vanished, same year as Michael's. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. So that's what it was. A cycle. A lineage of pain, passed like inheritance. Jason had become the thing he hated most. I sat at my desk, turning the photo over in my hands. The boy's eyes weren't cruel then, just frightened. He'd learned the wrong kind of strength. The next week, a national reporter asked for an interview. They wanted the full story. The father's revenge, the scandal, the moral victory. I agreed, but only on my terms. The camera lights were harsh. The reporter leaned forward. "Mr. Hayes, after 30 years, do you feel justice was done?" I thought of Michael's drawings, the silent night facing the dragon. I thought of Jason's terrified eyes in that photograph. Finally, I said, "He destroyed my son's life, but I won't destroy his." The truth already did. The interview aired that night. The clip went viral. People called me brave, strong, relentless. They missed the point. This wasn't bravery. It was grief that finally found its voice. Jason disappeared from public life. No statements. No comeback tours. Rumors said he'd checked into a treatment center under another name. His mother moved away. The town that once celebrated his family stopped saying their names. But the damage was done. Both ways. I visited Michael's grave the next morning. The grass had grown over clean, the stone soft with years of rain. I placed the photograph beside the flowers. "He hurt you?" I said quietly. "Because someone hurt him. But I ended it, son. It stops here." The wind shifted, rustling through the trees. For a moment I thought I heard his voice, the faint hum he used to make when he drew, somewhere between thought and peace. I smiled, barely. "You won, Michael," I whispered. The silent night finally spoke. As I turned to leave, a reporter called after me from the road. "Mr. Hayes, any final words for the people who still defend Jason Cole?" I paused, looked back once, and said, "Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's refusing to let the same cruelty live twice." And then I walked away, lighter than I'd been in 30 years. Justice hadn't healed me, but it had stopped the noise. 6 months after the hearing, Congress passed a bill called the Michael Act, a nationwide initiative to combat bullying and fund mental health programs for students. I watched the vote from home, the television flickering blue light across the same walls that had once held only silence. The bill passed unanimously. No party lines, no speeches about division, just quiet agreement that words can wound as deeply as any weapon. For the first time, my son's name echoed through the halls of power, not as a headline of tragedy, but as a law that would protect others. The day the president signed it, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a note from Anya, the reporter who had stood beside me through it all. He would be proud. I wanted to believe that. I needed to. In the months that followed, I poured everything I had into a foundation we called Voices of the Silenced. Its purpose was simple: to give families like mine a place to speak before grief became a gravestone. We built hotlines, funded counselors, sent speakers to schools. Letters began arriving from across the country, parents thanking us, kids telling us they'd finally been heard. Every message felt like another heartbeat returning to the world Michael had left behind. But not every story ended cleanly. Some were too late. Some were still fighting. I read every one. Sometimes, when the words blurred, I'd step into Michael's room and look at his final drawing. The silent night. Still facing the dragon, still holding the line. That image became the emblem of the foundation. A faceless knight standing tall against darkness. Beneath it, we printed his quote from an old notebook I found months after his death. If one voice is enough to hurt, maybe one can be enough to heal. Reporters occasionally asked me if I'd ever spoken to Jason again. I hadn't. I didn't need to. He'd become a footnote to his own story, and that was punishment enough. But sometimes, when the night got too quiet, I'd think of his mother's letter, of the boy in that photograph, and hope he'd finally found a way to face the man he became. People like to believe stories end with justice, with closure. But the truth is quieter. It's not about winning. It's about remembering, about refusing to let silence be the last word. One evening, standing by Michael's grave, I laid a copy of the law there, his name embossed in gold. The air was cool, the world still. Justice came too late for my son, I said softly. But maybe, because of him, it will come sooner for someone else. As I turned to leave, I thought of every parent still waiting for their voice to be heard. And I knew this wasn't the end of the story. Because what happened in the end will leave you speechless.